one of these licensing topics that's on everybody's mind. So what started the interest in terms of Java licensing? Well, it basically started with Oracle making a number of announcements, and especially one announcement was the end of support, effectively beginning January 2019. Now, Oracle made a whole range of changes. They started to make changes to the release schedule, and they turned it really, or they moved into a 6-month release cadence for every new Java version being pushed out there. But that they were not being providing any more free updates for commercial use, that was the primary reason why all of a sudden customers to Oracle, anyone using Java had to look into this licensing situation. How are we consuming Java? Do we need a license? Do we need commercial support for it? What's actually going on? So after about a year, I think, where everybody was sort of trying to get an understanding of what was going on in Java land, it turned out there was primarily 3 areas where you could have a situation, a licensing situation where you would need licensing for Java, because to the surprise of a lot of people, Java wasn't open source and automatically free. Free and open source does not equal each other. The first thing, well, yes, Java is open source. There's an open source version of it, but it doesn't mean that you are on one of these open source versions and it is automatically free. And that's what everybody had been assuming up till until 2019. And then as we sort of dug into the licensing agreement, because this was really the first time client that started to look at the actual license agreement. What kind of agreement do we actually have here? And a lot of clients, customers to Oracle, realized that they would have something called general purpose computing. This is a licensing part under the BCL license agreement. So a lot of clients, they suddenly realized that, yeah, we're not using the open source version of Java. We're actually using Oracle's proprietary version of Java. And the proprietary version of Java has some terms and conditions. It's only free for certain use cases. And those use cases was what Oracle referred to as general purpose computing. And then another part was also some of the licensable features that came with Java. And these were so-called commercial features. So if you're using commercial features, this was another area where you would require licensing. For a lot of clients, it actually meant, at least in the beginning, what they sort of rushed out to find out, are we using any of these commercial features? Because that was sort of the first easy way to sort of see if you are using something that requires a license. And we're going to see throughout this presentation that it doesn't really make much practical sense to go and look for the commercial features. However, of course, there are, at least it shouldn't be where your main focus is when it comes to Java licensing. So Java came from Sun, but it was open source back in 2006 as a way to democratize, I guess, the source code. It was a way for Sun to expose Java to a lot of clients. So Sun actually did have a commercial model behind Java. So that was not something Oracle developed or imagined or came with. It was actually already there. So the Sun had a team of people selling Java to mainly large enterprise clients, and that team got adopted into Oracle when Oracle in 2009, 2010 acquired Java and Sun as a part of it. And at the time, everybody was expecting something to happen, especially on the software side. The two main areas of the two main products a lot of clients were talking about was MySQL, and MySQL was a big, relatively big discussion topic because it was an open source database that Sun acquired a few years prior to they got acquired by Oracle. And the owner, the original developer, one of the original owners or the original developers behind MySQL was this very outspoken person. So he was very good at sort of whipping up a storm in terms of how Oracle were taking over the world with their proprietary platform with databases, and they would kill off all open source software. So it was just one of these areas, and along that came Java as a part of that discussion as well. They were afraid that Oracle, at least everybody knew that Oracle at some point would be commercializing Java and would be much better at making money on Java, because that was something Sun wasn't really that good at. So everybody was expecting something happening to Java. And then I guess because the years went by and nothing happened, when the change happened, everybody got a bit surprised that there was actually something going on. So when Oracle took over Sun and Java, they actually made a change to the Java licensing, and that's when they released the binary code licensing agreement. And it's one of these click-through agreements. So it's very easy to get on the binary code license agreement and not realize that you're on if you're like everybody else, you're just clicking quickly through. It's just something the internet is asking for, so why not just click through it as quickly as possible? It's like the iTunes agreement, nobody cares. And that's probably how most clients then ended up in a situation where they have accepted the binary code license agreement, because after all, Java was open source and Java was free. That was the general consensus. The easy way to sort of see what was going on here was that there was the proprietary website where you can get Java from. That was Oracle's website. You can download Java from there. It was pre-packaged and everything and ready to roll out. And that was the binary code licensing agreement. And then there was the open source website, the OpenJDK, the open source version of Java that was the place where you would get a pure open source GPL license type of agreement. Not a lot went to that website. You know, after all, it meant that you had to do some work, and it wasn't really clear to anyone where you needed to go for what. It only really became clear during 2019 when we realized that Oracle is not going to drop free support on Java. Now, that being said, Oracle is still sort of the primary steward of Java. So they are the ones who are developing and making and by far providing most funding to the Java team. And they are controlling the Java food chain more or less. And then they are releasing the open JDK into the wild, and then you can have all these downstream distributors who can do whatever they want to, at least under terms of the GPL license, whatever they want to do with Java, and for example provide support services and so on and so forth for Java. So what about the license agreement? So let's have a look at that. The binary code license agreement, it's up to 2010, so valid it's coming from the oracle.com website, and it's valid for Java 10 and up to patch version or update 202 on Java 8. It's an online click-through agreement, and it covers all the Java files, the binary code. It's very sort of extensive in terms of telling you that this is a license that you're getting, and all you're downloading from Oracle when you download Java is covered by this full license agreement. And I suspect it's because there is a tendency to sort of package and repackage Java products. But it's very it's covering just about everything in the Java distribution. And then it goes in and it defines general purpose. So everything is covered by license, and if you are outside of the general purpose computing, then you would require to get a commercial license. But if you are general purpose computing, you don't have to pay for a license. So general purpose desktop computing and servers means computer, including desktops and laptop computers or servers used for general computing functions under end user control, such as, but not specifically limited to, email, general purpose internet browsing, and Office suite productivity tools. So this is, it's actually, well, some clients said, well, this is very, it's a very open-ended type of licensing description. Yes, I see that if you're coming and from outside and you don't really know a lot about Oracle, the way the Oracle is licensing its product, yes, it seems very open-ended. But to a large degree, when you look at this and have an Oracle background, it's actually pretty specific in many ways. So in this case, anything that is classified as general purpose is free as per the agreement. So you can use Java for free as long as you can put it under that bracket that it's general purpose computing. Anything else, and then they go on and mention the user software and systems and solutions that provide dedicated functionality other than mentioned above, or designed for use in embedded or function-specific software applications, for example, but not limited to, software embedded in or bundled with industrial control system, wireless mobile phones, wireless, and so on and so forth. It gives a lot of examples of what is outside of the general purpose agreement. Now, just to give you a little bit of a reference here, so because I heard the argument, so since Oracle, did they all of a sudden realize that Java was not, this binary code license agreement was not, that companies were not following it? No, the Java team already knew, and there was a general problem that a lot of companies consuming Java, except the very largest one that was big redistributors of or distributors of Java, like you know, PlayStation. If you're selling millions and millions of units with Java embedded in the PlayStation, yeah, well, then you need a Java agreement. But for most other companies, middle tier, smaller companies, a lot of them didn't know about this. And the Java team that was in Oracle, and also before Oracle in Sun, was actually spent a lot of time on sort of picking up these users out there and educating, if you will, educating. You can also call it sort of a soft audit type of review, and making agreements with this type of companies. So it has been a generic problem, and it has been a generic problem for a long time now. But Oracle's change really push people into a situation where they need to do something about it, since there is no free support anymore. So general purpose desktop computing is within free usage. Anything outside of this is something you need to pay for. And then, of course, the usage of commercial features, that's not free. So you would find this if you went on to the website, went in and started downloaded all the versions of Oracle Java. You would see this agreement reference. So here's examples of general purpose. So you're browsing your internet, you're doing emailing, productivity tools, web conferencing tools, emailing. I already mentioned that. Working with Word or Excel, similar style of functionality. And then, of course, it must be under your end user control. So no specific, if it's an ERP system or something like that you're running, or if you have some type of specialized workflows integrated into your email or your productivity suite, you might actually end up breaking this general purpose licensing rule. So we had the binary code license agreement that came with Oracle up till Java 8, and then we got it switched over with a new version, a new agreement, which is going to be called the Oracle Technology Network Agreement, which is a much more it's a much more limited use type of agreement. There's no talk about the general purpose anymore. It's basically allows you just to use it for very, very specific limited use without going into a full commercial agreement where you would pay Oracle. And there is some development use allowed, so that's fine. And when we talk about test and development here, we are talking when you are creating Oracle or software that is based on Java. So you're creating a new application or a new system or something like that. That development environment, yeah, that's fine. But it's not tested development in terms of you're running some third-party app production setup. That doesn't include that. And then, of course, Oracle it takes out, so they approve it for certain product use, Oracle approved product use. They include Java into that mix. So if you're running Oracle applications, if you're running Oracle cloud infrastructure, well, then Oracle gives you basically Java for free. So it's a giveaway from Oracle, if you will. Others would probably look at it in another perspective, but however, if you're running Oracle applications, if you're running on Oracle Cloud, you will get Java for free. So when do you need to have a license or a subscription? Because it is, Oracle is delivering this as a subscription. It used to be a license, now it's a subscription because Oracle wants to put this on their books as a cloud service. So so everything from Java version, Oracle Java version 6, 8, 9, and 10. All Java installed there are not defined as general purpose. So anything where you're running Java versions here that is not defined as general purpose. And general purpose usage, if you are running a patch, so if you're running patch 2.11, which was updated or released in April 2019, or if you're using any of these commercial features if you're running the BCL licensing. And then if you're running Java version 11 and above patch 2.11 for Java version 8. So then you automatically go into a paid version, except if you are doing some prototyping testing, so meaning building your own solution on Java, then you can run it for free. At least until you are live with that. Okay, so we got the first poll here. So let me see.
So Martin, I think you can mute the sound. You can hear the chat. So I think you can mute the sound.
Oh yeah, no, I forgot that. Yeah, there we go. So if you want open source free Java, from where can you download the binary files? Yeah, so this is, exactly. So you need to go to the OpenJDK website to get the free version, the open source version of Java. If you go to oracle.com, you will get Oracle's proprietary versions of Java, and this is really, you know, at least to some extent where the problem lies, that it's you have different sources of where you're getting the different Java distributions. And it's easy to go to Oracle because they were, at least at a point in time, they were intermixed. So you could go from one side to another and easily end up on the proprietary side, meaning Oracle's proprietary version of Java. In the BCL, what limitations are there on usage? Is it answer A, no limitations, you can use it how you like as long as you don't update above Java 10 and patch 2.11? Or is it answer B, there are limitations on usage, general purpose is free, other usage is not covered by the BCL agreement? So what are we seeing here? Yeah, exactly. Exactly, it's answer B. So there are limitations of usage. If it's within the general purpose definition, you are free to use Java. But any use it outside of that, you would need to get a subscription or a license from Oracle. Very good. Moving on. So we had these commercial features, and interestingly enough, that was really in the beginning when we saw these issues around Java license, or when clients suddenly realized that we have to look into Java and we need to find out, do we need a license or not? The first thing, and I think probably that's because it seems like the most tangible way to go, is to talk about commercial features, because it was pretty clear from Oracle that if you were running the commercial features, you would need a license. So what is it? Well, it's primarily tools, software tools that allows you to manage and monitor Java applications. In large Java environments, or if you were developing Java and you wanted to optimize on your Java applications. So that's really, and there's a whole range of tools. However, if you are a generic Java user and you are using Oracle's binary code license version of Java, probably the most common tool or commercial features being used is the MSI Enterprise Installer, and that's quite common common to see out there, that because it's such an easy tool. So it's and this is basically just allows you to package your Java distribution and distribute it into your environments. So however, in this case, you actually, to use the MSI installer, you would need to go onto Oracle's website and download it, and you actively have to do something to start using the MSI Enterprise installer. However, if you're using it, it actually requires licensing from Oracle. And then, of course, once you patched Java on 2.11 or downloaded Java version 11, so then the review becomes irrelevant. Then you would need to license the whole bunch anyways. And actually, with the commercial features, this is just an add-on. Oracle, as they were moving for Java version 8 all the way up to Java version 11, Oracle was actually open sourcing quite a number of these commercial features. I think everybody, or all of them, except actually the MSI Enterprise installer. So that's something to remember. So commercial features, what should you be considering about that? So from our perspective, this is not a primary concern. This is actually not something Oracle is not reviewing for commercial features. They don't have the tools for it. They're not going out and auditing clients on these features alone. The commercial features need to be actively activated or unlocked. So like in the case with the Enterprise installer, you would need to go on to Oracle support and actually download it. So it's not that often we see real usage. It's the Enterprise installer that is really being used there in most cases. And here we just listed some of the commercial features so you have an idea of them. Mission control, we actually seen a few times as well being used, or at least being deployed out there. So this is sort of the general overview here. Now, as we said, a lot of these features are actually being open sourced, and it's not really something Oracle goes out looking at if you're using the commercial features. It's not that they have tools that they're going to be auditing you. So the Oracle technology, and this is just a refresh, so the Oracle technology network Java version replaces the binary code license agreement when you download Java 11 and upwards, or if you are updating with the Java patch to 11 and higher. And then again, it's going to be a click-through agreement. It's going to be very easy to accept this. And there's already we've already seen a lot of cases where clients have been out doing this and not realizing that they actually, not only didn't they realize that they were on a proprietary agreement to begin with, but now they also have actually gone through and accepted the new agreement that Oracle released, and which is a much tighter agreement, which doesn't allow any production usage of Java without you paying for it. And here we see, so again, it's development usage. It allows development usage Java on the Oracle Technology Network. It allows you to develop on Java, just like Oracle would allow any other use of Oracle software as a part of development. The Oracle doesn't charge for that unless you have a go-live application or some sort of a production system where you let's say it's a hosted platform or something like that, where you're actually running a live application. Now, we talked a little bit about that third-party users, so other corporations might or might not have agreements with Oracle. So I told you that this has actually been a problem for a long time, that third-party, in many cases, was using or distributing or somehow depending on the Java ecosystem without having a real agreement with Oracle. Now, in most cases, at least for the very largest companies out there, they have a distribution agreement with Oracle. They are sorted. But when you go down further down in the line with sort of middle-tier companies, smaller companies, you will find that in many cases they are not actually in alignment with Oracle's terms and conditions when it comes to Java. So that's just a good thing to keep in mind when you're working with any third-party applications provider. They might actually not have an agreement with Oracle. So just keep in mind that there is this level of risk when it comes to Java. And then, as I said, they strengthened up the agreement. There's no more general purpose usage. It's much more tight. Now, if you're using Java on a Java version 11 and upwards, you need to pay for it. In 99% of the cases, you need to pay for it. However, it does allow for certain situations, if you're running Oracle applications, if you're running specified Oracle products, and they have a list of that defined on their website, what is included in that free usage for Oracle apps and middleware. Well, if you're in that group, you can run Java for free. And it actually also includes an audit clause. So some of the questions here. So if I'm running Oracle EBS, so one of Oracle's applications, and it requires a Java web applet to start, do I need to license Java on EBS or desktop? No, you don't. So it's on this pre-approved product list that allows you to use Java. So, and here's a link for that as well. How do you know what agreement to follow? So in most cases, now, of course, this is a moving target, but in the vast majority of cases, you are going to be on a BCL license agreement. It's just the nature to Java. So a lot of enterprise customers, they have, first of all, they have many versions of Java, or at least several versions of Java, but often they have many versions of Java. And typically, the main version of one of the most well-used version is Java version 8, which also is the version that is going out of, or went out of support, free support. So in terms of changing the game, Oracle picked the right moment in time to get really maximum pressure in terms of generating opportunities and sales when it comes to Java. So that commercialization of Java, they really picked well, from Oracle's point of view, a good way to do it. So the Java team, the Java sales team, as a result of this, has been under immense pressure, just making these Java deals. What about commercial features? Well, it becomes relevant to licenses if you're not using Java for general purpose. It's just one of these areas where you typically, it's not the thing that's gonna make you change your mind or make any drastic changes when it comes to Java. The commercial features is not gonna be the thing that it's gonna move you into a paid subscription on Java. It's gonna be other things like the need for support, and the BCL license agreement, because the commercial features are something that is relatively easy to turn on and off in most cases, and in most cases you won't have it running at all. How do Oracle audit my usage? So in this case, Oracle doesn't really audit their clients in the same way that they are auditing on the database side and the rest of the technology stack. So Oracle has a very well-defined way of going out auditing their database customers. So they have their tools for it, and they have a process for it. Now remember, Java actually came in relatively late into Oracle, and following that, the Java team has been sort of going through many sort of reconstructions. So it's been very apparent that Oracle's been working on this strategy change for quite a while. They definitely wanted to commercialize Java one way or another, but that didn't mean that they developed a audit functionality type of pushing the market. The audit they typically do is more on a sales or soft-based audit, where they're going out interviewing their customers and clients. So that's the way they are pushing this. They're going out, having questions, having conversation with Java users. Now they are tracking you. They're tracking you on when you're downloading. They can go and see who has been downloading Java. And there are certainly Excel files out there where they can go in and see who is actually downloading what. And the same method, they were using the same method in the MySQL team, but they would go through and see, but who is on our website, who's actually downloading Oracle MySQL. So that's an obvious way that for Oracle sales to engage with any customer. So you might say that if you don't have an audit clause and you don't have the tooling, is it going to be easy for me to push them off? And that is going to be a completely different type of question. But in many cases, if you're working with someone on the Oracle side who actually knows what that person is doing and has a technical understanding, it's going to be very difficult to say no in a dialogue with Oracle and not end up in a situation where they basically soft audit you. So another question here. At which point do you accept a Java OTN SE agreement and move away from BCL? Let's see here. So, yeah, so exactly. Exactly. So when you upgrade to Java 11 or security patch to 11 and upwards. So that's where it happens. That's how it's going to sneak in on you. Can you use Java SE commercial features with Java 8 and not require a license? And what do we say here? Yeah, there's a few who still sort of a bit confused about that Java 8 is free to use. So if you're using any of the commercial features on the Java distribution 8, yes, you need to pay a license for that. It's not free to use. Then you would need to go to the OpenJDK version, and you wouldn't be able to use any of the commercial features. So yeah, the answer is A. If you determine that you have Java 8 and you do not need support or any updates, are you 100% sure you don't need a license? So let's say that you're one of these happy-go-lucky users of Java who realized, yeah, okay, but it's nice. We don't need support. We are using Java 8. We don't need support. Can we just go ahead? No, exactly. You need to review your license terms and conditions under especially when you have the binary code license agreement. If you're on the OpenJDK, if you're full open source, then if you're one of the 1%ers, I would say in this case, yeah, all is good then. But for the vast majority, you need to go in and review the terms and conditions under the binary code license agreement, and you need to understand if you're using any of these commercial features. But in the end, it's typically the support that gets people. Is it free to run Java version 11 for test and development for third-party applications? Answer A, no, it's only free for prototyping, testing, and developing your own application. Yes, it's free per Java OTN agreement. Yeah, exactly. Let's just kill that whole free thinking kind of idea around Oracle commercial Java. There's nothing free here. You have this one situation. If you're developing applications on Java, yes, you can do the prototyping, testing, then it's fine. So the answer is A, correct. So here is sort of, it's an overview of how to go about your Java review. So first, and this is something where you start out with any inventory tool where you can get an overview of the Java distributions and the Java versions and the different patches you've applied across your environment. So you start to analyze Java files and servers and your clients. If you are using non-Oracle Java, then clearly no subscription is needed. You don't need to go and buy anything from Oracle. I would say non-Oracle Java is not completely, any open source, fully open source version is, so the OpenJDK is actually coming from Oracle, but it is, however, non-Oracle in a commercial sense. Then you need to analyze the Oracle Java files, and of course, if there's any new Java, well, from the OTN agreements or any of the version 11 upwards, you need a subscription. If there are any old versions of Java we are talking about the binary code license agreement, we need to go in and find out how is Java actually being used. So how are you actually using Java? So finding out, are you working with this in what you can constitute or think of as a general purpose within that framework. Now, if you are running on Oracle applications, middleware, or any OEM agreements or anything that comes in through a third party, well, then it's pre-approved and you don't need a Java subscription. However, if you're running your own different types of applications, you have a variety of systems, and this is the case for most clients, there's quite a lot going into this. Well, then you would need to review your usage in terms of the binary code license agreement, and we recommend you to get your local legal's input on what is the actual situation. Is it general purpose or is it not general purpose? If it's not general purpose, well, then you need a subscription. If it's general purpose, the next logical thing is to ask, are you using commercial features and do you need any support and updates? If there's nothing needed, well, then no. Otherwise, yes, then you need a subscription. So this is just a high overview. It's relatively low in the food chain that you see that the general purpose is becoming relevant. So going back to why haven't this been a problem before? Why haven't we been talking about this before? Before 2018, yes, there were actually Java sales reps around, but there were very, very few of them. And they were only working with the very largest of clients. So it basically the top tier IT vendors out there, and they were not doing any formal audits. They were doing these soft audits where they would go out and identify potential customers or vendors that were using Java and didn't have an agreement with Oracle. That was sort of the main way to operate in the Oracle Java team. Now, then they made the changes, and clearly they realized very early on that there was a massive increase in sales. So the Java team really grew within 2018, 2019. You can see that the Java team really ranked up in terms of salespeople. And they also developed an inside sales organization to support the field salespeople. So it was a huge increase, and they were actually generating very, very large numbers. There was high growth compared to just a few years before that. Now, as it goes with Oracle, they have always had a top-down approach. So they're going to be focusing on the very largest of companies. So they are out there to make $1 million plus type of agreements. They're not selling themselves short in any ways. That they're looking for these very, very large agreements, and they did so very successfully. So very early on, after they made the changes, Larry Ellison himself was actually, when they were sort of talking to these investor meetings, when they were doing the Wall Street call, Larry, he was pointing out that Java was doing extremely well, or had a very good quarter, and they continued to do so. And this is actually something we're getting sort of reported in from old acquaintances, colleagues within Oracle, and they've had a tremendous year, and they are going to go on to do even with targets being triple or quadrupled. They were even meeting those targets first quarter of the year, so they were doing quite a lot, and that's going to continue for a while. So here we're just going to have a look at Java. So how does it look? How is clients actually using Java out there in the wild? And for the vast majority, you are on the Oracle proprietary, the JDK distribution. Now, clearly, this is going to change. This is, as I said before, it's a moving target. But this, at least a year back, that was the picture. And not only that, the OpenJDK, the real open source version, was very, very small compared to the proprietary version use of Java. And then you had all these other players in the market. So you have IBM, different types of Azul have their Java offerings. It's minuscule in the grand picture. It's minuscule. And all these other vendors, Java downstream, let me call them downstream Java vendors in the market, they are not really, they don't really have a Java offering in the same sense as Oracle has. They are the ones who are investing in Java, not really anybody else. So there is a reason why Oracle is, they have a tight grip on this. And here we see in terms of distributions, so by far the largest distribution being used out there was Java version 8. Now clearly, again, this is a moving target, but this is it's probably very much still the largest by far. So it might be 60% now. I don't know in terms of, but this is the picture we are seeing, that still by far Java version 8 is the most widely used distribution, and Java version 8, most likely you on the binary code license agreement, most likely you have these licensing problems out there. That's really the case, and Oracle knows this. So here we have sort of a response to how you're gonna respond to the new release cycle. So remember, we talked about how Oracle changed to this 6 months release cadence, which is quite a change compared to the old release creations, which was 3-5 years in between, and they came out with these massive updates, and very often they were quite a long delay on them. And that was actually something Oracle, from a development perspective, they wanted to move away from that because it was a problem. They were not quick enough, and they were not modern enough in their approach. So that's one of the reasons why they put in this 6 months release cadence. So here you see always stay on the latest version of Java. It's just a very few that is going to go with that. Then decide on release by release basis. That's 30%. That's relatively high, but yeah, it makes sense. Stay with the long-term release support, or the long-term support releases. So every 3 years or so, Oracle is going to make a long-term supported release of Java, which basically ensures that the commercial, whoever is running Oracle's proprietary Java and running it in a long-term fashion, has the option to do so. So Java version 11 is the long-term release, so it's going to be supported for multiple years by Oracle. So you, as a big company, doesn't have to follow this 6 months release cadence. So and clearly that's one of the large, or a big motivator for a lot of companies to actually go on and get a stable versions that's going to be stable and supported for many years in the future. That's what Oracle is commercializing now, at least to a very large degree. But you can see here that's appealing to a lot of clients. And then quite a few is still about 28% is still sort of waiting out and seeing what's going to happen here. What is so Red Hat has some solutions on the table they're going to be supporting. IBM has also been very active in the market. So can we move to an open source or another version of Java is really the calculation a lot of clients are looking at right now. But we are not that interested in that. We are just looking at this from an Oracle licensing perspective. Here you see some of the release schedules in terms of security updates. So what is going to happen with the new release cadence is that you're going to get one update for each Java version release. And that even goes into the OpenJDK. So the open source distribution is going to get that one update, but they're not going to continue to get updates as they did in the past. That is really over. So if you want to be on that stable platform and continue to get it on a year or many year basis, long-term basis, well, then you will need to go out and buy that service. So let's have a look at the Java licensing metrics. So the Java licensing basically follow Oracle standard licensing. It used to be that Oracle offered this on a standard perpetual licensing basis. And just to give you guys a frame of reference, on the desktop side, the NUP licensing, Oracle started out with 2,000 NUPs. So they had a license all approach to this. They were not licensing 5 users here. They were licensing in the thousands. So that was Oracle's approach to that. It's not that they're looking for the small fish here. They're looking for the very largest of companies. They want to sell thousands of licenses. In terms of license metric, so it's the standard licensing metric. So you have 2. You have a processor metric and you have an NUP metric. So here, it's you have your server where you're running Java, and then you have you've got your CPU, and then you got to find your core factor and multiply that with the number of cores that you have, and then you can find out how many processes are required for your server that is running Java. On the end user side, so the desktop-based users, you need to count the number of users who have access to the actual desktops out there. So again, with Oracle licensing, it needs to be countable. It needs to be unique users. So, you know, they need to be logging into the desktops. If you're not logging into the desktop and then everybody's got access to it, you would need a processor-based type of licensing model approach to that type of devices. So, so that's it follows the standard terms and Oracle licensing metrics. Here's the price list for the Java subscription. And again, here you can see that and this is public, so you can go in and see it, how Oracle licensed that. They don't really worry about small stuff. If you want to talk to a salesperson, you got to be, you know, way up there. So I think this is very, very obvious the way Oracle is approaching this. They don't want to talk small agreements. They want to talk large agreements. If you're coming to Oracle and talking about a small agreement, you better have a good reason to do so. And you sort of need to find your unique way into that conversation, because they're not going to spend any time on you talking about a few hundred users here and there. It's as simple as that. And if you are coming as a large company and asking for a few hundred licenses, you really have to have your story straight, because Oracle is, at least if it's someone capable, a salesperson in front of you, they're going to start asking right away. They're going to start asking some difficult questions, and you've got to have a good answer for that. So, but in overall, this is a large by volume type of licensing approach. And here you have the discount they're giving per volume, and don't expect them to move away from this price list type of licensing. From the organization side, they are very strict on terms of giving out discounts. They're not doing it. It's not at all the same approach that they have with the standard Oracle technology. They are really sort of exploiting the opportunity. At this point, they're not giving anything away for free. So that's the mentality that you are going to be working with. So as we're working with standard Oracle licensing rules, we also know that virtualization applies. And Oracle has this very interesting perspective on virtualization. And I would say you can almost see that in their licensing, their volume-based pricing. They're sort of factoring in virtualization. That's most likely going to be used out there with all those Java users out in the wild. So here is an example. So if you have your standard servers, you got a two 8-core Intel CPUs running, here is the cost for that. So it's going to be, it's a per month pricing. So you're going to have 12 months of 8 processors of $25. It's going to cost you $2,400 per year. However, if you're running VMware, you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to be licensing the full lot, most likely. So in this case, we have 200 licenses of $25 per, and over 12 months, that's going to be $60,000 per year. And here we have a link to the licensing policies. So virtualized environments. So Oracle is differentiating between the hard partitioning and the soft partitioning. And you really want to be in the hard partitioning policy. Some software is considered hard partitioning policies. So hard partitioning is the policies that allows for sub-capacity licensing. VMware, unfortunately, is not amongst those. We already talked about how this is a problem, because if you see the policy and you would say, or you would argue, at least if you are at the end, the wrong end of an audit, you would argue that this is quite an important policy. Why is it not defined in my Oracle contractual work? Why is there no reference to this in my Oracle contract? Where is it, how does this align with my Oracle processor definition? And it doesn't at all. So there's no reference. You have to go on and online and read the policies to find out what is going on here. And then there's a reason for that. And we're not going to go into details here why it's not referenced in the actual contracts. Just good for you to know that it's not. It is a sort of a sore problem in many cases that's ended up costing a lot of clients a lot of money, and you might actually have an opportunity to find back here. It doesn't really harmonize or align with the way that Oracle is defining their processor definition, where they're going in and talking about installed and or running. How do you define that, or how do you use that type of processor definition in a virtualized environment? That's good information for you to know if you end up at the wrong end of those types of conversations. So here you have an example of the licensing impact. Now we sort of changed. You have 3 situations here. It's where we are sort of showing the impact if you're running on vSphere version 5.0, 5.1, and 6.0. And you can just see that the ability to move workloads around from each and every version of VMware is expanding. So it becomes easier to move around in these different clusters. And for that, and between clusters and the different vCenters, for that, you need to incorporate into your Oracle licensing rules that potentially you can move these workloads around anywhere. You need to license anything that is basically any physical resource that is allocated to any of your vCenters or your VMware environments, which has a significant impact if you thought that you could just license one cluster or just one server or one cluster subserver, however you think about it. I would say, as a rule of thumb, when you're thinking VMware and version 6.0 is not shiny new anymore, I would say, as a rule of thumb, you should be thinking you probably need to license everything. And certainly that's going to be the mentality Oracle is going to have if you're going to be talking to them. So risk tolerance versus more payments to Oracle. So now clearly you need to go through this full list and find out what are you going to do with Java to begin with. Are you going to go towards a commercial license are you going to be paying Oracle? Then, of course, the next question comes, oh, by the way, we're running VMware. How big of an implication is this going to be, and how are we going to deal with Oracle when it comes to that? So I would say in this case, you always run the risk of running into an audit, and where you have to basically fight Oracle on this. Yes, there are some tools we talked about with the policies being not referenced in your contractual documents, and you could go in and take up that battle with Oracle. However, in many cases, it's not going to be an easy one. So you need to prepare for that type of engagement, or at least to be aware of that that actually might be something that you need to work hard to with Oracle or fight Oracle on. So just being aware of this is a good thing. And yes, you can fight Oracle, and Oracle is offering some solution in certain cases on this. On Java, however, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. What Oracle is going to offer you on Java is going to be one of these subscription-styled ULA agreements, and they're going to be asking you to pay a lot of money for that. And it's probably going to be more expensive than one of your standard database ULAs at this point. Now, that being said, of course, there are things you can do. To limit the exposure. So if you decide to go with Oracle Java, there's a number of things you can do. You can always try to consolidate on a physical host. So you're sort of removing you from your VMware environments. And there are also, of course, situations that there are options out there. Clearly, you can move to other virtualization technologies. Oracle would be very happy to take on that. They always have an offer on hand when it means moving away from VMware over to Oracle's virtualization technologies. And then, of course, you can do these technical things where you limit the exposure. However, I would say any technical changes where you sort of, for example, try to remove a host from a shared storage, or any type of thinking in those terms can be. Oracle is not going to approve that. You might have a good point, but Oracle is not, per definition, going to approve anything when it comes to that. And there can be many sort of technical ways of going in and trying to limit the exposure. But as a rule of thumb, Oracle is not going to take that on face value. So here we got another question. Is Java SE desktop licensed per user or per device? Is it the answer A, it's per device, per laptop, or is it answer B, per user? Yeah, but I think that's it was pretty clear in the beginning. No, so it's licensed per user. It's not licensed per desktop. That can be included in the user license. So user doesn't mean a human user. It can be, but it is a NUP style licensing. So it's a NUP license. So if you have a laptop with 5 users having access to it, you need to license all 5 users. Is Java SE licensed per core or per CPU? Is it answer A, per occupied CPU socket, or is it you count cores using Oracle's processor core factor table? Yeah, But that's pretty clear. It's the standard core factoring you are using in this case. That's good. Java SE is deployed on VMware version 6. Do you need to license the virtual server it is running on? Answer A, yes, only count virtual CPUs assigned, or is it B, no, you need to license all vCenter servers instances, your whole company. So, yeah. Yeah. So this is you need to license everything. So any virtualization that is not Oracle's technology, yes, there are a few others, but as per standard, just think the worst case possible in most cases when it comes to virtualization, especially with VMware. You need to license everything, and it's not counted per virtual CPU. Oracle really doesn't care about that. Oracle is only caring about the physical hardware underneath. They're not counting a number of instances that you're running. So it's answer B in this case. If you have devices, laptops used by public uncountable users, how do you license it? Is it answer A, you should license with your Java SE processor license, or you license per device, meaning desktop? Yeah, okay, but that's pretty clear. I think some people here are just no. So yeah, so you will go with the processor licenses if you are not in a situation where you have accountable situation, so you know exactly who has access to the Java. So if it's not a controlled environment where you have unique users, you need a processor license. So we talked about how, as a part of this, we recommended that you would have your legal to go in and review the actual users, or at least involve them in the decision-making process, because clearly for some clients this can be a massive cost that they suddenly need to justify, and you need to explain that throughout the organization, and you need a consensus on what are you actually paying for here. So in terms of starting points, we talk about reviewing with your internal legal and have an understanding of how the usage applies. Now, because there is a gray area when it comes to the virtualization problems or Oracle's policies around virtualizations if you're using a virtualized environment. And then there is the whole area, or gray area, if you will, in terms of are you using under, if you're using the BCL licensing, then are you using it under general purpose computing terms? So those two aspects are important to qualify and verify internally in your company. And of course, in that process, we recommend that you do it together with your company lead. So we've established that we have Oracle Java. What should we do? What should we do? So again, review your use of Java. If it's not general purpose, should it be licensed? It should be licensed if it's not general purpose. If you determine if it's general purpose, will you be running it unpatched? Are you not going to be supporting your environment? So that's another question you of course need to verify. If you run Oracle Java and don't want to license, you should uninstall Oracle Java. Yeah. Or at least you should go to the OpenJDK version, the open source version as a very minimum. If you can establish which applications that requires Java, is it Oracle? If it's Oracle application and they requires Java, then you should go to this pre-approved applications checklist and see, okay, are they included? And most likely, if it's from Oracle, yes, the Java users is going to be included, and it's therefore free to some extent, right? Is it non-Oracle? Well, then you need to go and ask the reseller if they have an OEM agreement with Oracle, and basically make sure that you're covered. In most cases, large companies would have an OEM agreement with Oracle. If it becomes a little smaller vendors, then definitely validate it. So that's it, really. And here we had the commercial features, and this is just to review once again to make sure that that we have it. So what is it? Well, it's the commercial features is basically features that you use in large Java environments, typically focused on performance and monitoring of Java applications, and managing large in Java environments. The most well-used feature we see there, commercial features, is the MSI Enterprise Installer. Almost all the companies that we've been working with has been using this because it's just a very good way to mass distribute prepackaged Java. And then, of course, when it comes to commercial features, if you are on patch Java 2.11 or you've gone to Java version 11, this whole question around commercial features becomes irrelevant because you're already on a version of Java which you should be paying for. Excuse me. Good. When do you need to have a license or subscription from Oracle? All Java that is installed and up to Java version 10, that is not where you're outside of the general purpose definition. So all the proprietary Java that has been installed where you're running the BCL licensing agreement. If you're running a general purpose, if you patch Java with update 2.11, or if you're using any commercial features, then you need a subscription. And if you are, again, if you're on Java 11 or higher than patch 2.11 on version 8, then you need to be on a proprietary or a paid subscription, unless if in the very rare cases that you're actually developing your own Java applications. So I know there's a lot of Java or companies developing Java applications out there, but in most cases, this is not a in terms of free usage of Java. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how to collect the Java that you would need to do your own internal review. And basically, when you do this review, you basically need any SAM or inventory tool, and you would need to go in and first of all, collect all your Java data. So you're going to find out who is the publisher. If it's Oracle, if it says Oracle and Sun, that should be your primary focus. And then there is, of course, OpenJDK, which is the open source version. And then there's going to be a few other third-party types of distributions, but that is not really as such relevant to this Oracle licensing setup. So from there, you go and find out what are the actual versions. So document the different versions, the different distributions, and the different patches and updates that you've applied, because we want to know if you're using 2.11 and above. And then what we typically know is that the good thing to go in is to have a conversation with the system owners, the application owners, to get an understanding of where are the critical systems, because in many cases, and this is going to be a general problem with most Java users out there, is that there's going to be an overflow of information. There's going to be a lot of Java running in your environments, and approximately 70% of that Java has no real reason to be there. You can just basically clean it up. But there's going to be Java usage that is critical, and that the way to define that is basically to go down to your applications owners and help them to verify that if you're using that, and if you're using any of these so-called commercial features. It is the easiest way to do it, because the application or the use of commercial features, you need to have it turned on. You need to actively go in and turn on these features. If it's been done, someone will for surely know that they are being used or not. And then, of course, because it's Oracle licensing, you need to understand what are the physical platforms, what are, how many servers, how many CPUs, how many cores, what are the type of CPUs, so you can apply a core factor. And then you need to understand, are there anyone using virtualization? If you're using virtualization, what type of virtualization? Verify that virtualized environment to have an understanding of what will be the licensing impact there. And of course, if there's any cloud usage as well. How do you analyze it? Well, you go from basically multiple, you're going to have a lot of data with all kinds of use situations, and you're going to realize that it's a big mess, basically. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut it down to understanding, are you on the binary code license agreement or are you on the OTN agreement? That's the first step to find out. So Java version 11, Java version 8, update to 11, and any sort of Java publishers are the sort of main focus area. And that's where you're going to find out what are actually happening. And then you're going to define what is the usage to get some understanding of what is actually being deployed out there, and to what degree is it being used. Typically, you will see very quickly there's going to be a picture of a few systems that has high Java usage, and where going off Java can be somewhat problematic. So you can't just, let's say that you are looking to move completely to open source, that cannot be obtained. That will be the realization in quite a few cases. Even though a lot of the third party or the downstream vendors, they're going to tell you, but it's just drop in and replace. Yeah, it might be that in many cases, but in a lot of other cases, it's not going to be that easy. So that's on the technical side, that's the type of evaluation you need to do with your teams. So the whole freezing support, and we've seen clients talk about freezing support. So basically, stop using any new versions of Java. Maybe for a short while, that can be something just to give you a little bit time to think about what you want to do. But it's not a long-term solution by any means. You really need to move forward in most cases with these Java questions and find a workable solution that also involves you getting updates and security patches. So basically, this is a very practical approach, honing in on the most business critical systems that you have. and just focusing on these very tight the binary code license agreement and a few distributions of Java, so so you know what to differentiate between. You can very quickly actually get into a rabbit hole here if you want to find out what is all the Java being used for. It's going to be an information overload, and you can spend from here to eternity to find out what is actually going on. In many cases, especially on the desktop side, it has proven to be easier just to go out and basically remove the Java and see if anything fails. And if something fails, you reinstall the Java, and then you find out what is actually going on. And that is somewhat a very practical solution to some of these problems. So in terms of Java licensing optimization, evaluate, we talked about how to evaluate the number of instances and the distributions across your servers. And then you need to understand if they are used in virtual environment. And if you are using it in virtual environments, you need to understand what is the specific setup. Are you able to move it onto a dedicated physical server? What can you do? In many cases, what we see, at least on the desktop side, is that by far the most Java out there being used or being deployed is not actually being used. So you can clean it up 70% or more. However, they will typically leave you with a few central systems, business critical systems, that is going to be very, very difficult to do anything about. But when you do this activity, you're going to realize that with a little bit of working around, you can sometimes optimize this quite considerably or consolidate your Java usage. And from that perspective, you can really do quite a significant cost optimization when you do this review of your actual Java usage. Then again, you have to hold this up against the total cost of just buying your way out of this subscription for all your Java. License optimization on desktop. If you don't need Java on desktop, you can try uninstall Java on desktop. So basically create a plan. The users who need Java can reinstall. So this we've seen being applied in a couple of cases. It's been working quite well. OpenJDK is free, but there is there's no long-term support. You're just going to get that one update for a specific version, just one update per version. Remember that licensing is not per desktop, but it is per user. So it's an NUP licensing metric. Yeah, I think we covered most of this. So probably one of the most interesting here is just basically what we've seen being applied here in a number of cases. So as you sort of rolling out your strategies in terms of containing Java and find out what's going on, it can be a very good tool to simply block anyone going on to Oracle's public website, so the commercial and downloading commercial versions of Java. So simply blocking it off to make sure that it's not being at least reinstalled on laptops and on your servers. And then, of course, on larger systems, you can always have your dialogue with, or you should have a dialogue with the vendor if they they have a distribution agreement with Oracle. If they don't, it's a somewhat other situation that needs further investigation. And here we have it again, the Java roadmap. It's just as a reminder. So do the analysis. If it's non-Oracle, if it's OpenJDK, if it's anything but Oracle, no subscription is needed, at least not from an Oracle licensing point of view. You review the Oracle Java files. If it's old Java, binary code license agreement. If it's new Java, you need a subscription. If it's old Java, you need to go and analyze the usage, get the legal input, whether it's general purpose or not general purpose. You can also have usage which is under Oracle standard applications, Oracle middleware, or through an OEM. If it's already in if you're in that bracket, well, check out if it's pre-approved and see if this is actually, typically there would be no need for an extra license. On the general purpose side, if it's general purpose, if you're under general purpose, the last thing you need to review is actually if you're using these commercial features or not. This is not, for by far most service providers out there, so consultancies, the first thing they start with is actually reviewing the use of commercial features. And it doesn't really have much practical sense, because it should be the last thing you're actually reviewing. And there's probably not going to be much usage from there. And the usage that there might be there, typically the use of the enterprise installer is something that's easily fixed through other means. So it's not something you are going to be heavily relying on or tied to, for that matter. So and BCL Roadmap, so not general purpose, how proactively, how to reduce. Then, of course, not general purpose. There's a do nothing scenario where you need subscription for all servers and desktop where Java is. If you go in and do the proactively, then you can go in and call your vendors and have that dialogue. But in this case, really only do for the most business critical systems. There's no reason to go out and spread this across all the different Java use cases you might have out there. And then, of course, you can go in and talk about the migration to OpenJDK or other Java distributions, and you can do that business case. Is IBM better? Are they going to give you better terms and conditions? Are they going to be cheaper than Oracle? You can do the same for Red Hat. Most likely, some will see it. Yes, it's going to be a better business case. In many cases, I think probably not. But clearly there needs to be an evaluation of your choices there. So is there an audit clause in the new Java agreement coming on from the Oracle Technology Network? Is it A, yes, it came with the new OTN agreement, or is it no? So, and this is interesting because there's actually not an audit clause in the BCL licensing agreement. But they are doing soft audits. They are doing these type of conversation style, interview style audits with clients. So yeah, it's a little bit, yeah, no, there is an audit clause in the new agreement. So if you, accidentally downloaded it, click through the agreement, yes, there is an audit clause now, and Oracle has the right to come and audit you. So in most cases, I would think that people are going to be in that block that has already accepted that Oracle can come and audit you on your Java usage. So that would be the practical implication. So Java uninstall versus paid subscription, that's basically it. So you gotta realize or make the business case against the two. So there's the cost of migration to new Java technology. Now, going downstream, so do remember that Oracle is the the primary contributor to Java. They are the ones controlling the code. They're the ones that are owning the rights to Java, and they're the ones developing on it. Yes, there are others in this game as well that are contributing to the open source development, but from a high-level perspective, Oracle is by far the largest contributor. They are the ones who are controlling it. They are the ones making Java. So moving to any third-party downstream vendor who is tinkering around with Java, and some of these have very good use cases. So some of like Azul systems, they've focused on very specific type of use cases where they're doing specific garbage collection in Java, which has its use for certain situations. And their way, they are sort of unique in the market. And there are other situations like that. But in most cases, if you have a generic or general approach to Java, I would say, at least from a technology point of view, you want to stay as close as you can to the core. And that means, you know, work with the OpenJDK, not any flavors of OpenJDK, at least if you don't want to be paying for Java. Consider the security risk, the cost of freezing systems. If you're doing that in a way to combat any sort of subscription costs coming from Oracle. And then, of course, that whole consideration to move to any third party, because there's going to be a cost associated with that. They're going to be asking for money, and they're going to be, in many cases, there is going to be forking off from the main distribution of Java. So you end up being reliant on technologies without sometimes realizing it. So there is just as staying with Oracle has its negative, there can also be negatives in terms of going out with a third-party vendor that might be a 20-man strong company, where if you compare it to Oracle's investments in Java, is just peanuts. So there's many things to consider in this case. And then, of course, then you have to look at the Java cost and just dealing with Oracle as a whole, and just knowing that this is probably going to be a problem in the future as well, because right now Oracle is going through a situation where there is plenty of deals to go around. They're having, the Java sales rep are going to have the best days of their lives in terms of quotas and sales numbers and targets reached and all that. They're going to have a good old time, but that's going to end. And when that ends, they're going to move down the food chain. They're going to be looking for new deals. And what Oracle is very good at is basically soft auditing their clients on these types of matters. And now with the introduction of an audit clause, I would think that there might be a few threats throwing around, a little bit of hard attitude towards some of these Java clients. I would expect that coming in the future, because at some point the party is over, and it's going to be a tough deal for these Java sales reps. When that time is going to come, I don't know, but it certainly came for the Oracle database and middleware stack. So it's a good thing to consider. But this is at least an unknown price on the left side, and here you know the price to a large extent. So I just wanted to, so we are going through this